Welcome to the webinar, How to Harness Human Ingenuity and Supercharge Your Search. We'll be talking about what today's companies need to understand about updating their digital search strategies to cope with modern business demands. But first, we have a few simple housekeeping matters for our viewers. Now, at the bottom of the screen, you'll find some application widgets for your use. These widgets are all resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to optimize your desktop space. The slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge those slides, click the Enlarge Slides button in the top right-hand corner of your presentation window. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget. We'll try to answer them during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed, or if we run out of time, it'll be answered later on via email. Please know we do capture all of those questions, and we want to make sure you receive an answer. Now it's time to get started. My name's Danny Bradbury, and I'm excited to lead today's discussion about the how and why of transforming enterprise search. Now think about how much your computing experience has changed since the mid-90s. Back then, even ubiquitous internet connectivity was a big deal, but today it's in your pocket. The spell checker was the height of sophistication, but now an AI can take a pretty good stab at a first draft for you. But search hasn't really changed that much. You might search for a company's product on a phone today rather than a bulky desktop PC, but otherwise, it looks largely the same, doesn't it? Including the off-target results and the need to search in multiple places to find what you need. And that's why we're here. We're trying to work out why enterprise search has stayed so static and look at how and why it needs to change. And to do that, we're talking to two experts in the field. First up is Fraser LaChance, Enterprise Sales Manager at Lucidworks. So Fraser, maybe tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at Lucidworks.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Danny. Hi, everybody. My name is Fraser LaChance, and I'm an account manager and strategist at Lucidworks. If you're wondering about my accent, I'm a Canadian living in England. I've been working in search and content discovery for about 5 years with a focus on scale, hybrid operating models, manufacturing and distribution. So I spend most of my time at Lucidworks working with organizations to implement search programs that ultimately improve how companies manage and deliver their information to ensure their customers are as successful as they possibly can be.
Excellent. Well, pleased to have you here, Fraser. And our second speaker today is Tom McElroy, and he's Senior Director of Global Search at Dell Technologies. So, Tom, maybe tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely, Danny, and thank you all for having me today. Looking forward to this very much. So long-time Dell tenure, going back all the way to 97, rejoined the company in 2019. I'm part of the e-commerce leadership team, and specifically I have responsibility for all non-paid search. So that's as inclusive of site search, which we're going to talk about extensively today, but also off-site search. So rankings on Google, Amazon findability, and then our movement into the world of AI search as well.
It's a multifaceted challenge you've got there. I don't envy you, but pleased to have you here as well, Tom. So let's actually begin with a question for Fraser. I wanted to dive into this by outlining the problem. You're just articulating the challenges that enterprises are facing with search. So maybe explain why it is that everything else seems to have moved forward so quickly, but enterprise search is still stuck in the days of Jennifer Aniston's flipping Friends.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it really comes down to it being a two-sided problem. There's challenges both on the customer and the user side, but there's also challenges on the enterprise side as well. So on the customer or the user side, yeah, what we're seeing is that these discovery experiences, they may not really have evolved, but customers have. Expectations have shifted, and customers have more diverse and complex search requirements than ever, mostly fueled by the changing digital landscape and, the apps that we use on our phones on a day-to-day basis, and, every way, at all the places that we interact digitally. So sometimes customers know what it is that they want, and they sort of need that pure intent-based sort of experience where we're cutting through to just really solving that objective. But sometimes customers don't know what they want, a la Netflix, and that discovery experience needs to be more serendipitous, where we're guiding our users through more of an experience to help guide them towards something that they didn't even know that they were looking for. So the challenge lies with the enterprise being able to actually support both of these types of experiences in a really intuitive way. And it's sort of oversimplifying. That's sort of two different types of experiences that the customer might expect. But as soon as we start delving down deeper, especially in the realms of B2B, things can start to get even more complex. On the enterprise side, I think companies are just really struggling to cope with delivering on this problem and meeting these expectations. It's a bit like hitting a moving bullet at the minute, where requirements are expanding ever rapidly. Overnight, the launch of ChatGPT shifted user expectations. And so when clients or enterprises set out to start to tackle these challenges, the list of use cases that they start with might actually triple by the time that they actually get a program live. So definitely challenges on both sides of the equation.
Just before we hop onto the next slide, I'm really interested in this idea of the changing digital landscape. But what about the changing customer landscape? Do you feel as though people in search, whether they're customers or whether they're employees, have changed the way that they search or the way that they approach search in the past 20 or 30 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like there's a hidden language that we don't even consciously realize we're speaking to digital touch points. And the way I would sort of frame that is the way that you speak with Google is different than the way that you speak with Amazon or the way that you speak with ChatGPT or with YouTube or Netflix. You as an end user, you kind of just learn what inputs you're allowed to give to those systems to try to get the output out of it and ultimately accomplish your objective in that context. So we're sort of seeing, with the rise of, all the, new fascinating applications that are coming to market, all these sort of new languages of search that are coming to the front lines that we don't even really consciously know that we're learning how to interact with.
Yeah, and also, I kind of get the feeling that sometimes a lot of, especially non-technical customers, may be really still stuck in basic technology understanding. Google provides, and a few of these search engines now provide, bangs and sort of modifiers to sort of only search on a particular site for a particular file, file type and so on. But still, you look at a lot of those public searches, and people are still searching in the search engine for things like a web domain. They're typing the web domain into the wrong place. So, do you feel as though the technology is evolving beyond people's ability to cope with it in a lot of cases?
Yeah, I mean, it's where, the conversation really quite quickly shifts from a conversation about search to a conversation about digital transformation, right? Really at the core of a business's digital value proposition is what they put in front of people, right? So whether that's content or products or answers, and if we sort of look back to the origins of search and, the inception of inverted indexes and, kind of like the basis with which we were trying to do lexical matching and really just, try to match on letters and words and structure, we're sort of really rapidly moving past that into the realms of AI. And I think whether we are looking at search or in, all of the adjacent applications that could be, involved in that ecosystem, we're seeing organizations challenged with implementing, AI just in general.
Well, let's talk about some of those organizational challenges. This is a question, I guess, for Tom. I'm interested, Tom, in how enterprises are coping with this whole challenge of search evolution and the need to change their approach.
Yeah, from what I've seen and talking to my industry peers, not all that well, right? You think about how powerful search is. We invest an incredible amount of money in this browse layer, right? So we have this happy path, this perfect path we expect customers to come to: home page, category page, product details page, through to checkout. And customers don't think linear like that a lot of the time, right? So if you look at what search traditionally can convert 5 to 10 times higher than a browse visitor, right? Their intent. They're coming with something particular in mind. They want to know. They're giving you that request. So it's kind of surprising to me that a lot of companies don't put the level of investment they should into search, just because it has such an acceleration effect on the business.
Okay. Do you feel as though they're just not investing in browser infrastructure enough, or the infrastructure required to browse and search through things like product catalogs?
I think it's more around the daunting cost of what you think about having a capable search platform, right? And so that's, to do that, we often think of that almost like heart transplant surgery in our industry, right? It's a big endeavor, but the business case is significant, and it's worth the effort to make those investments because the returns are so dramatic, right? Another area to invest too, beyond the engine itself, is to make sure you have the data science in place, to look at the data, to look at the personalization signals, to understand the customer, to serve up that relevant answer that's in context for that customer. And so that's another area that that customers fall behind in the investment level.
There's also I've heard people talk about the difference between learned content and commerce searches. Could you talk a bit about what learned content is and how it differs from commerce search, and then how well companies are doing at integrating them?
Right. You think of learned content as information you're serving up, whether it's PDFs, case studies. If you're a home improvement company, it's how-to videos, how-to clips, and things like that. And so often that is separate from search that's related to specifically buying those products, right? And we tend to find that the more forward-looking companies are finding ways to integrate those two together. If you're on product search, bring back in context what that learned content is. If you're doing research, maybe you're in the upper funnel, you're an early stage buyer, you don't know exactly what you want in terms of products. Start to seed those products there as initial ideas. At Dell, we've seen when you combine those two, you can get as much as a 50% increase in the commerce sale by bringing that commerce content into the Learn engine, right, to priming customers. Or maybe someone's landed in their mid funnel, but you can move them more quickly and more deeply into that funnel. So bringing that back as a unified search experience is something at Dell that we've begun working on, and we can continue to evolve.
How well integrated should the results be? I've been to a lot of websites where you search for a particular key phrase and it comes back with different sections, resources, blogs, products, stories, and all these kind of different categories that may not make much sense to anyone other than the company in some cases. And so I wonder whether it's better to return different kinds of context in a clearly categorized way, or whether you don't want to return them essentially as a kind of single molded response that you can pick from, but that makes more narrative sense.
I think what you're talking about is us letting technology lead the customer experience, right? It's awful easy to create these web parts and components of the page where we're going to bring this here, this here, this here, this here, and humans don't think like that, right? We're very we like to get our information in context, right? So if you're bringing back some learn, some shop, some learn, perhaps you've got something that only shows up on the right rail when the particular trigger happens. I think the most forward-thinking search providers are considering, how do we make that dynamic? And I know later we're going to talk about AI, and AI gives you the ability to bring back things and render a lot of these assets in different ways at different times. In theory, every search should be different. Every search has different intent and different goals, right? So why shouldn't each different search bring back content in a different way? And I think that's the North Star of where you would want to go.
Yeah, that sounds pretty inviting. Yeah. So I mean, these are some of the strategic challenges that we're facing as organizations. Maybe you could talk, Fraser, about some of the organizational challenges, the things around things like organizational structure and how information moves within a company, but then also some of the data challenges, because those two things seem pretty intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the picture you sort of just painted there with the, that classic enter the search box at the top of the page with a drop-down menu, you're looking for something, but you have to pick the section, that you're trying to go into to find the result. But if you don't know where to look, then you can't find anything. And, that really what we see all stems from the way that the teams are organized behind the experience that you're interacting with. So those sort of like silo drop-down menus, they very often tend to relate to individual teams or, departments that sit behind them. And what, we see from a customer or a user experience is that, you end up with this sort of fragmented or just like non-cohesive experience. And to Tom's point, like people don't think that way, right? We're used to having that human conversation where you come forward with your objective or your question, and the person who's trying to, actually provide a response is, able to pull information from whatever part of their brain they need to actually make you successful. And, that sort of parallel or between, how dynamic someone thinks to provide an answer versus that real siloed experience that we're used to is, part and parcel of the problem. So I think that almost always search experiences delivered by enterprises really reflect the structure of the teams that sit behind them. And those siloed teams are always going to deliver siloed experiences. It definitely extends a little bit, or sorry, Danny, did you have a...
Well, I was just thinking, that one thing that occurs to me is that teams are generally, as I understand it, in many organizations also responsible for their own data. You get these kind of database huggers who, they're kind of, it's almost like a political territory. I own this database, this is my data, it's clean for me, leave it alone, which of course silos the data as well as the teams. So could you talk about well, first of all, have I got that right? Do you feel as though that's an issue? And secondly, what does that mean for the search experience as well?
Yeah, totally. And this is where, again, quickly we start to come into the realms of change management and, digital transformation in general, where, kind of these last, years or kind of even decades, sort of the value of a business unit can kind of be, tied to the data and the structure and the processes that they put in place. But really what we're talking about doing is breaking down those barriers. So, it's not just as simple as, changing the way that files are formatted. Like, it tends to be actually changing part and parcel of the ways that teams are working, and then the way that those teams are interfacing with each other. So, it starts to become a really big challenge. And because data is at the core of it, and there are, definitely implications for the quality of data that goes into a search system and the outputs that come out of that system, we're seeing a lot of teams and organizations kind of get stuck in this isn't going to work for us, or our data is not in order, and we need to fix our data first. But we see this big struggle where companies, they continuously get into this cycle of needing to fix their data, but not actually understanding what it is about the data that they need to fix to be successful with the search program. So there's sort of this like cohesiveness of I guess really connecting the impact of what data needs to look like to get the most out of an end user experience, that organizations are really struggling with making those connections, and as a result making a lot of investments in the wrong areas when it comes to data improvement.
Yeah, I don't want to be rude about this, but isn't this something that the chief data officer was meant to sort out? I mean, we've had those guys around for 10 years. They were meant to have fixed this problem at this point.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think in the grand scheme of, if you look at sort of the history, of how long that role has, really been prevalent across organizations, coupled with the pace at which the external environment is challenging, or is changing rather, it's no easy task, right? So I think we're definitely seeing, CDOs get, more and more authority and autonomy and a greater voice at the table. But there's no doubt about that role from an executive perspective is really getting pulled toward, between the the internal ways of working of teams as they stand within the organization today and what's possible, and those external factors of this constantly and rapidly evolving environment. So being able to balance those two it's not just about balancing the technology, it's about balancing people and expectations of experiences as well.
It sounds like a Sisyphean task trying to fix data in an organization as you're accruing more of it, every day, right? I mean, it must be. And then you got the political issues where maybe the CDO doesn't have a seat at the boardroom table. Someone's doing it off the side of their desk, or they're not politically well positioned within the enterprise. I guess there's all these other nuances people have to consider, right? It must be tough. Interesting. Okay, well, maybe let's talk about this idea of a more intuitive search, because we've kind of talked about the problems and now I'm more depressed, but I want to hear about what the possibilities are. So I kind of get this vague sense that it's different to the search we're used to, but maybe crystallize it for me, Fraser. Help me understand what it looks like. What is the search that I deserve as a customer rather than the crummy one I've got?
Yeah, sure. I mean, done well, it can seem almost clairvoyant-like, right? Akin to, that conversation I was describing between two people, right? Someone actually asking a question, and everything about the context of that situation and the way that the question's been asked, it's being processed by the person on the other end of things. So rather than that person trying to seek the content or the answers that they need to be successful, really good search starts to flip that on its head, and it becomes a dynamic conversation where those content and answers are actually starting to seek out the user, right? And it's kind of like us having this conversation right now as we're speaking. You may be thinking, what it is that you now want to bring to the conversation as we're having it. And I think that's really what good search looks like. And we sort of move beyond the old thinking of search just being a box at the top of a page or of an application, and kind of moving more towards how do we replicate the concept of, or that sort of feeling of a natural dialogue with your digital experiences.
Let's maybe crystallize this in a scenario that will resonate with a lot of people, right? And one that occurs to me is, I'm a woodworker, right? So I'm always going to the hardware store looking for some new tool that I need. But a lot of the time, I hit the kind of teenage guy who's been employed for the weekend, and I'm asking them about something, and they have no idea what it is, and they go to the if they know where it is, they'll direct me to an aisle, but they don't know if it's in stock or not. Or maybe I don't quite know what I want. I'm asking for something with a British name because I'm a Brit, but I'm in Canada, so it's a completely different name over here. All these kinds of things, right? Or they'll go to the screen because they have no idea what it is, and they'll type in a misspelled keyword, and I have to sit there watching them do the search that I could have done at home and trying to be polite, and it's awful, right? I mean, no, I'm not putting it down on the teenage guy who's been employed for the weekend, but it's not really the interaction I wanted. So explain to me what that could look like, right? When I go to the hardware store this weekend, what should I be expecting rather than what I've got?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess if we look at like what search looks like today, I guess it's kind of a bit like if you were to walk into Home Depot or B&Q for you, Danny, ask for a hammer, and just be directed to aisle 10, right? So this situation sort of assumes that exactly what you need, and is sort of returning a result based on a literal match, right? You're looking for a hammer, right? But your objective isn't to find a hammer. Your objective is to actually fix a squeaky door, and sort of this type of experience of, hey, there's the hammers. It doesn't actually help you find the WD-40 or the screwdriver or the hinges that you actually need to get the job done. Whereas if we kind of flip that on its head, like the ideal search is like talking to that really knowledgeable store assistant, and you go and have that natural dialogue with that human, right? You describe your problem. My door's squeaking. It's as easy as that. And they start to guide you through a set of questions, right? How big is the door? What type of the door? How many hinges? And you start to kind of get into this troubleshooting or discussion that is ultimately just all about understanding your intent. And then in turn, that associate's gonna, guide you towards the right tools, the right guides, and things that you're gonna need to be successful with that project that you didn't even know that you needed, but you went into the Home Depot or the B&Q because you trust that brand, and it's not just about the products, it's about the entire brand promise and ensuring that you're successful. So I kind of contrast things that way.
Plus, I guess I end up buying more than a hammer, right? I end up buying 5 products instead of 1, but they're all exactly the products that I know I'm going to need to come back for. I didn't know that I'd need to come back for. So everyone's a winner, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
That sounds fantastic. Again, poor teenage guy, but I'd really rather deal with something like that. So it does feel more intuitive. It feels more proactive. It feels more conversational, which is great. Honestly, though, it kind of sounds a lot to me like the conversations I have with generative AI these days, and that must, I imagine, have a part to play here. So maybe this is one for you, Tom. Could you talk about how generative AI is going to help us get to the kind of utopia that Fraser described?
Yeah, I think that ability to have that human-like dialogue is powerful, but we're here to sell something, right? I mean, we're in the business to sell, right? So what we need to do is meld together that search experience, right? So you think of this top of the search bar and a generative response, but we've got to bring back items in context, right? We need to use both the generative AI engine and a traditional search engine, because even if generative AI can bring back products, and we've experimented with that, it's not so good with the context. And that's what these search engines are good at. The relevancy, the machine learning, right? Everything that we do in data science to take those signals and bring that content back is very powerful, right? You think about how it's going to bring a customer deeper in the funnel. Think about your general conversation. If you're, to stay with Fraser's example, I've got a squeaky door, so I want to figure out what I do. I look at a couple of YouTube videos. At some point, I need to turn the corner from learning to shopping, buying, and then actually fixing my problem and addressing my true need. And that's what Gen AI is going to do. It's going to bring you deeper in the funnel. It's going to serve those assets up. If anyone listening and watching today hasn't used Perplexity, I highly recommend you go check it out. It's a new generative AI search engine. I think it does what all of us would want to do in e-commerce, in giving a good answer, bringing back products in context, asking relevant follow-up questions. And the results can be dramatic. At Dell, we created an AI product advisor. ChatGPT launched in November of 2022, and in February of 2023, we had already started some development in this area. And now, as part of the AI product advisor that we use, for customers that use that, we see triple the level of conversion of customers who don't use that particular way to find and interact. And the conversion is even higher than traditional search. So melding all that, but it's still a separate experience. It's a separate chat. So melding all of these things into one unified experience from the search bar, from where we all know where to go, is going to have tremendous potential and drive productivity for the customer and sales for the merchant.
Interesting. So, I mean, it kind of sounds, again, I'm looking at it from a user's perspective. There was one problem I was trying to solve for years, and it really bugged me. When I was a kid, I read this book, and it was, it was just an amazing book for me. I was like 8 years old at the time. But I didn't remember the title. I thought it was something like Footprints in the Snow or something. And I kind of remembered vaguely the story, but I just remember sitting, in my room reading this thing when I was a kid, and it had a really emotional impact for me, and I wanted to find that book again. I'm really into collecting childhood books, and so I tried for years searching in the conventional search engines, Footprints in the Snow. I had no idea what I was talking about, and then I asked ChatGPT. I kind of gave it this rambling description of what I thought the book was about and what I thought the title was, and it actually came back with the book. It was Treasures of the Snow by Patricia St. John, by the by. And it really connected me with something I'd lost at a very visceral level. That mattered a lot more to me than finding the right, hammer at my hardware store, although that's obviously really important as well. But that kind of sounds like where we could go with this, where search could really impact users at all levels, and actually help them find things that they've half forgotten. Is that what you're describing? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Danny. That's a perfect example of how search powered by Gen AI can delight. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about delighting customers, users, and making them more successful. Because when we make the users more successful, when we help you find your story, you keep coming back. And then to Tom's point, we can drive business outcomes. And it's able to do that because it's not just matching on keywords like the old search that you were using. It's Gen AI is actually understanding the context, the intent, and the meaning. And even when the input is imperfect, and a lot of the times when customers are coming to consume our products and services, the inputs that they're providing us they are imperfect, right? They're describing the problem in the best way that they're able to. I can kind of give, I guess it's another example, right? And we do a lot of work with B2B organizations. If you sort of imagine like an engineer searching for materials for high temperatures, right? So like a basic search might list materials that work in heat. So that can of course be useful, but the smarter system, or the one that you were just describing interacting with, Danny, it could actually notice that that person has also searched for electric car parts, and suggest not only materials, but materials actually for that application, with design tips, with problem solving guides, with links to suppliers. And that's kind of the magic, is actually being able to guide the user down this path towards being successful.
Excellent. Okay. Well, it sounds like a bright future if we can get there. So this is useful stuff. I still don't see much of it today, though, right? I mean, we're not quite there yet, are we, with a lot of enterprise search? So could you talk about, Fraser, what the journey is going to look like and how you're going to help people get there?
Yeah, absolutely. It is, I think we're sort of moving from, as we were sort of talking about before, like I think organizations through, all the rise of all things AI, starting, I think, to realize that it's not just about solving the technology problem. It's about solving both the technology and the people problem, right? Sort of two sides of that equation that we've been talking about. And I shouldn't say problem, but, the challenge or that opportunity, right? So we've sort of created like this two-sided framework that we're calling the unified experience equation. And it's meant exactly to help organizations start down this transformational journey. And so it's meant to be a collaborative process where we help organizations to create a unified approach for multiple teams, so kind of solving that enterprise or that organizational structure side. So this is where we're trying to take teams from sales and marketing to IT and engineering, and sort of bringing them together to actually think about data interaction, how it's architected, and ultimately, how it's going to serve end users. And also on the sort of the searcher, the experience side, start to look at search and these discovery experiences more holistically. So sort of moving away from that tools, tech-focused use of data, sort of that, call it surface level use, to kind of this, I guess, this experience that we're talking about now, this sort of more multi-dimensional, adaptive, or I think the easiest way to describe it is more human-like experience that, actually can start to understand the needs of users and customers.
Would you say it's not a kind of product as such? It's not something you buy in a box? Is this more of a kind of framework or a strategy for approaching the problem with customers?
Yeah, I think it's, if we're seeing one thing, it's that one size is not fits all in this domain, right? Each organization has, unique customers with unique objectives. They have their unique products and services and, sort of the content and unique answers that go along with it. And the way in which, sort of that all needs to be blended together, all underpinned by the brand promise of that particular organization. It's, it takes a sort of a different approach that, can be accomplished through certain frameworks, but it's, by far from one size fits all.
Cool. Okay. So we've got this kind of strategy that you'll use to walk customers through the process of rethinking their search. Could you tell us more about this unified experience equation and what it looks like in practice, Fraser?
Yeah, of course. We kind of have 5 key components, and I guess unsurprisingly, from our conversation so far, like the first one is know thy users, right? So, if we want to deliver human-like experiences, we need to deeply understand the users, right? We need to understand their journeys, their objectives, what information they're going to need to succeed so that we can actually go and design an experience or start to orchestrate the components that are going to best support them to accomplish their objectives. We quite quickly come on to data, and we've talked a little bit about that today, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword. But please don't start with a data improvement project, right? There is value to be gained from advancing your sort of your search adoption or your search maturity that can immediately start to deliver business outcomes. So rather, our proposition is that you begin by focusing on using strategies to kind of fill the gaps in legacy data and start to deliver value quickly. And then over time, start to refine data to further enhance outcomes. If you could have perfect data, then I don't think you'd even get a perfect output. But, we're always going to have data challenges, and it's about just starting. Thirdly, I would say, kind of carrying on that theme, it's improvement over perfection, right? It's about prioritizing changes that are going to have the most impact on your user experience and further the success of your customers. So this takes frequent experimentation. It takes swapping in and out components. It's sort of, it always reminds me kind of, in commerce, there was so much talk about, headless and decoupling architecture. And, search is very much like that. There's a lot of individual components that can be swapped in and out to solve for different user needs in different moments. So it really takes that iteration. As things evolve and you sort of have the foundations in place, your data's plumbed in, this is when we want to start to really think about unlocking context and some of the things that we've talked about today. So this is where we can start to leverage semantic capabilities, neural hybrid capabilities, generative capabilities, and those are different examples of kind of components that we can kind of swap in and out of this equation. But ultimately, these are capabilities that you need in your organization because they can deliver on those goal-oriented experiences. So like the one that you outlined, Danny, being able, your goal was find this book that I read as a kid, and it takes blending together these different components to actually make that happen. And I would say just finally, underpinning all of this that is really crucial, that we've shined a bit of a spotlight on as the challenges that exist within the organization. It's really crucial to establish some form of center of excellence around this, right? To just ensure that there's clear ownership by forming a dedicated team that's going to really focus on this constant optimization. Because, as soon as we get the technologies of today in place, you bet that, all Gen AI capabilities and technologies are evolving at a pace that we've never seen before. So, it's going to really require to have foundations and teams in place that are just going to be set up to work differently than they have previously.
I really like this idea of incremental improvement. I kind of get this suspicion that a lot of enterprises have perfection anxiety around search. It's such a big problem. It's kind of hard to see the edges, right? And so they don't know where to start. They don't know how to prioritize. But by giving them a kind of a basic one foot in front of the other approach, where they may not be perfect in the first 5 or 10 steps, but they're going to get ahead in meaningful ways. That's going to help them unlock some of maybe the stasis they've had around this issue. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure Tom can probably speak to this one as well.
Yeah, when you step back and look holistically, earlier you referenced the ability to combine search, right, across functions of learn, shop, support. And if we think about where our customers going, where we can provide content and make it relevant, and we look ahead to some areas like support, for example, we looked at our support stack at Dell and everything Fraser said, right? We went through and looked at the data, we looked at the customers, and we realized that there are some customers that come from support to shop. And we said, well, what if instead of just allowing customers to do that manually, go to a masthead, navigate through the site, if we actually served up some links to relevant products right there. So they go to support, they search for new drivers, maybe their system's a little old, and then you've got the offers for new deals on the right. We saw a couple of things happen. The first is that about twice as many customers moved from support to shop that previously had, and even more exciting, those that came converted at 50% higher rates. So you're looking at that data to say, where do I have these opportunities, and how do I build out this experience where my customers are coming and can find me, right? So we tripled the sales through these 2 tests of customers coming from support to shop. We were in our practitioner, we will work for months to get a 10% improvement in something, right? And so to crack the code around user behavior and data and opportunity. And so this is something that we'll be rolling out on Dell.com over this coming year. And we're very, very excited about the business opportunity that holds.
That's like a quantum leap, isn't it? That's a big success story there. But still, so you got these 5 components of search. It's still a big problem. You've done a really good job at trying to break it down, but it's still kind of daunting for a lot of companies. So Fraser, maybe talk about where companies begin. What are the first steps they take in this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what Tom's outlined is what's at stake, right? I mean, it's, sort of I think it begins by recognizing that, in sort of a discipline that, we've been, in conversions where we're chasing, 2%, 5%, 10% and investing huge sums, when there's the opportunity to double or triple, revenue through a channel, it becomes something much more strategic, right? So I think it's about pivoting from search being a a tactical line item to something that is a core part of your digital transformation, right? So I think it's about pivoting and having enterprises start to think about this whole frame as a strategy, right? So, I've sort of touched on, right? Your digital value proposition is like, it's only as good as this content that you put in front of people at the right moment, right? And if you're doing business online, like, this really needs your attention. So I think having this approach from more of like a strategic level, it will allow you to outline your goals for search, but have a voice at the table in sort of this overall digital transformation strategy, right? Because what we've talked about is sort of the two sides of this equation that, in some ways it's almost easier to make the technology changes, but what's really harder to do in especially large organizations is to restructure teams. And I think by having this more holistic lens over search, it can start to inform big changes like restructuring teams, right? Because as we've said, it's the ways that the teams are structured behind these discovery experiences is very often what they look like. So it's about tackling both the technology side, but also the people side as well. And so I think it's really important to start with, really just elevating the, I'd say making search a first-class citizen in overall digital transformation.
And Tom, it sounds like this is what you've done based on what you've been talking about. You've rethought search at Dell to realize some of the possibilities that we've been talking about here. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your journey there and how you're using search today?
Absolutely. So we started off in summer of 2022 and really got together both the business, the technology, across all the search stakeholders at Dell. We built a North Star. We said, what does this future look like? Now, realize this is pre-Gen AI revolution, but we were able to look and say, we need to unify these indexes. We need to bring this shop, learn, and support content together. We've run a couple of these tests in support and seen these dramatic results. And to Fraser's point, once we built the business case and we received funding, it did elicit an organizational change. About a year ago, we took the search engineering that was in our data and data understanding, which was separate from our UX teams, and we combined them into one. And it's created a sort of seamless development flow now on the IT side. As a business, it's about just then the ruthless prioritization. And then evolving, and being open to the change in technology. We didn't know Gen AI was going to come our way, but it has such tremendous potential. We absolutely have strong roadmaps to add that component to our search.
Excellent. Okay, and so, one of the commandments that stood out for me, these sort of biblical commandments for enterprise search is know thy users. Could you talk about how enterprises can help organizations to achieve that second know thy users commandment? And Tom, maybe that's for you.
Sure. I think it really comes down to spending an incredible amount of time to understand what signals can you collect, right? And if you step back, we're in a world where third-party data, which is marketers and digital practitioners we relied on for so long, right? These incoming customers where, we've got tags and cookies and all of those things that have been put in place is going away, right? It's going to be removed from the Google browser. Apple's already moving it from the iPhone for mobile. And you look at the incredible amount of regulation, whether it's in Europe through a GDPR or others. Customers want to own their own data. They don't want an enterprise taking that data freedom away from them and misusing it, quite honestly. Right, so we got to rely on this first-party data, right? So how do we collect that, right? We've got to collect data on customers as they move through the journey. It's not going to be provided to us. So what page are you on when you search? That should be different than a search on a different page. What did you click on? What was the context of the products I clicked on? If I've signed in, I know the product that you bought previously. Maybe in my world, you bought a 5-year-old very high-end gaming system, and now you're online browsing gaming. I shouldn't show you entry-level gaming systems, right? My knowledge is that you've preferred this higher-end, more robust system. So I should start there. And it's really melding these signals together with data sciences, behavioral science, to look at that end-to-end customer journey flow, find out where I can get those nuggets of information. Even when you're in the search results stack, if a customer is browsing past certain results and they run another search, I shouldn't serve up that same content that they browsed past, right? The system should be smart enough to know that, that's not a preference for them. So let's do everything we can to improve that relevancy. We all want to market one-to-one to customers, and I think that's a unique challenge, but clustering and understanding how those customers are moving through the site and what they're doing uniquely can have dramatic results in improving that search relevancy and getting us that golden data we care about, right? Which is what searches add to cart, which searches lead to conversion, and using that farther up in the funnel.
So, I mean, clearly a data strategy is a big deal here, which I think is another of the commandments. But does that mean, Fraser, that pulling all of your enterprise data into some sort of warehouse? Because I can imagine attendees for the webinar here wincing and shaking their heads at that.
Yeah, I guess there's sort of two sides. There's two important types of data. So there's the data that you've just mentioned, Danny, which is sort of, we can call that like the product, the content, and the answers that people are actually looking for. So the goal is not to move where that data resides. The goal is to, there's enough ways of working that we need to change. And if you really think about, the way that how data exists in an organization, it's a reflection again of those teams. So, kind of at that part of the assembly line, we can kind of let things be for the time being. And we want to actually just source that data and then index it in. The frameworks that you put in place can actually shape that data or normalize it to start to apply, all the clever strategies and techniques that we've been talking about. But the second type of data is, what Tom just touched on. And I think that is really important, in the face of, what's changing in the external environment, is to think about, what not only what your governance strategy for your user data is, but also your ownership strategy of that data, right? And so, we're seeing like a key industry challenges as organizations start to, move down this path towards delivering increasingly relevant discovery experiences. They kind of have these two choices, or this fork in the road, where they can sort of think, more about relying on external technologies to make sense of their customers, or they have the opportunity that I know that, Dell has done a bunch of work around, is to actually own that experience, right? Own the understanding of that data and the insights, because ultimately the way that your customers are interacting with your sites and your digital properties is your IP, and it's the rocket fuel that you as an organization can use to, propel your organization forward and capitalize on these business outcomes. So I think it's both, being able to manage the data, the things that people need to find, but there's a huge component of trying to understand, how are we going to actually own and develop, our own algorithms and, capabilities to, deliver these experiences that are going to be unique, that are uniquely going to deliver on our brand promise.
And that idea of owning data and refining it for discovery is really where, I guess, context comes in. Is that right, Tom, that this next commandment, context and AI? Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. I think that this is going to be unique for every industry, right? But you've got to find a way to connect the data. I can't emphasize strongly enough what Fraser talked about in the importance of getting this data foundation right. So one of the things we've done at Dell is we've created a knowledge graph in our search. So for any given product, it has all the interconnects to all of its attributes. So we know definitively, if someone types for a product, say a particular laptop, and they say, I want it with 16 GB of RAM, we know all of the specific products. But the other thing about the knowledge graph it gets for us is compatibility. A lot of times customers are frustrated when they're looking for replacement parts or other things, like what works and what's interconnected, and it can do that. But ultimately, as we think about AI is good with unstructured data. Danny, I loved your example of looking for that childhood book, because you gave it unstructured data. You just gave it a broad description. And it is very good at that. But AI with structured data is almost, I think you used the word rocket fuel, Fraser. It is the rocket fuel, because now Dan knows exactly with precision, in context, what to provide up. And that, being cognizant of that context is critically important, and trying to dial that in with all of these new technologies is really the key to driving much better conversion.
Excellent. Okay, and there's a final part of this 5-component strategy, which is a center of excellence. Fraser, maybe you could round off these commandments by telling us a bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to talk to marketing about whether or not we want these to be commandments. But it's a cross-functional team, right? It's a team that owns and continually improves the discovery experiences that you're offering your users, right? It has to straddle product, data, UX, and really, if we sort of just rewind all the way back to like what's the number one challenge that organizations are facing in terms of being able to progress in this, it's that we often see just a lack of ownership, right? Someone owning search is not the same as someone in an organization owning experience, right? Like what content is really going to surface to any user in any given moment, right? It's your entire digital value proposition, right? I mean, we had a client that had marketing, IT, and product teams all making changes without coordination. We have that siloed menu at the top that you described, Danny, and it just it doesn't leave the user coming away feeling delighted, right? It doesn't leave the user, with the highest degree of probability being successful, right? When this enterprise actually created this CX Center of Excellence, it just kind of all started to come together, right? They started to align teams across different departments. Search became iterative, evolving, with users' needs and business goals, and just is all about removing friction from the process. And above all, it's about ensuring your customers or your users' success.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks for that, Fraser. I think this has been just fantastic. I'm certainly looking forward to a better search experience as companies begin to tackle these challenges. And you guys have given me some hope I'll finally be able to find the tool I need at the hardware store, even if I don't know what tool it is yet. So anyway, it's over to our audience now. This discussion has generated a few questions here, I see. So I'm going to dive into the Q&A and just surface a few of these for you. So one I see here is, how do I begin building the kind of tech stack I need to support this kind of initiative? And Fraser, maybe that's one for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like we've talked about, we often do see companies tackling this challenge with a tech-first mindset, but at its core, the goal is about making users successful, right? So that's why it's crucial to start with this super deep understanding of your users' needs, and then ideally work with experts who have done this before to identify what aspects of those journeys, if improved, would lead to better outcomes. So whether that's faster decision-making, higher engagement, smoother transactions, whatever it is. And then I think sort of the second piece that's really important is to sequence your efforts really carefully, right? I think you made the point earlier, Danny, we don't want to boil the ocean, right? Organizations do want ChatGPT like experiences now, but that success depends on impactful actions and being able to measure progress and demonstrate it along the way.
There's someone's finally surfaced the elephant in the room here. Hallucinations. They say, I'm still worried about AI systems hallucinating. I've heard some pretty scary stories, and I think we've all heard some pretty scary stories about AI going off the rails. How much of a problem is that? And Tom, maybe that's one for you.
Yeah, glad to take that. It's a legitimate problem, right? We can read the headlines and see when AI is applied very broadly, how uniquely challenging it is. I think there's a few things. The first is, what data are you training the AI on, right? If it's very specific to your company and your industry, the AI's answers is going to be much, much more precise around your industry. But as I think about it, there's probably three things that you could do depending on your budget and resource level. The first is, you've got to do prompt engineering. You have to tell the AI how to respond to certain types of questions and what things are completely out of line, that should not elicit a response, right? Personal information, threats, anything that would be dangerous. So that try and put extensive work to keep AI in the guardrails. The second piece is an application called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. What this does is, when you send your question into the AI, you grab that question and you complement it with your own data. So the AI is not just getting the question and going to its public sources. If I'm asking something about, computer infrastructure in an educational data center, and I can add context like white papers to that when I send it, the AI is now going to have much better context and, again, be able to frame that better. And then I think the top tier is, there are some packages out there for content security, AI content security. Microsoft Azure has one, where it'll both adjust the inputs and the outputs. I'll give you an example. The way it can reduce hallucinations to almost zero is what it does is when it renders the answer, it sends the AI answer back into the AI to fact check itself. So it's not just giving an answer one time and hoping it's right. It gives the answer, it fact checks it, and then it sends a new answer. And from my understanding, it reduces it to near zero. We use tools like that at Dell, and cross fingers, so far in a year that we've had our product advisor up, we have not had any significant hallucination experiences that have come to our attention, should we say.
That's encouraging. That's good. And another one here. Someone says, this all sounds great, but I have to justify this to the C-suite. They have a lot of problems to solve and a limited budget. So what's the argument to win them over? Fraser, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, sure. Always a challenging situation. But yeah, I think gaining executive approval can be tough, but it's often more about showing the potential for progress rather than getting full approval upfront. So for one example, we had a client that we worked with that started by pitching just a smaller, lower risk pilot project that we supported, demonstrating how these capabilities would improve customer interactions on their own data. And it only took a couple of weeks to accomplish. So they didn't aim for a complete program rollout right away. Instead, they focused on delivering visible quick wins. And once that pilot showed results, in this case, it was higher CSAT, it became much easier to gain executive buy-in for the broader program. So the key was really just building trust through initial progress, which helped kind of shift the culture a little bit more towards innovation and willingness to invest in the full vision.
This next one's quite pertinent, actually, but based on your answer here. In order to build trust, I guess you're going to need to measure it somehow. And someone's asking, what kind of KPI metrics should I be looking at to determine how well this is succeeding? Revenue, net promoter score, or something else? Tom, how about you take that one?
Sure. Thinking about that, I mean, you have obviously the core net outputs that I think the customer hit: revenue, CSAT, NPS. As search practitioners, we're trying to evolve search in clusters or for high volume specific searches. So I referenced earlier what I call golden data, right? So if you can find out for a search what has been added to cart, what has converted, what are those products and those product sets, that's critical information you get. But then there's also some intermediary measures that are very important to us as search practitioners. One is what we call first click-through rate. So when somebody executes a search, what's the likelihood that they click on anything at all? And how do you use that as a feedback loop into your logic and tuning team to refine that? The second is average click rank, which is the amount of depth a customer will go to click. So if they click on the second item, and they all do, it's an average click rank of 2. If it's farther down, it could be a 5, 7, 9, right? So you want to get that average click rank as high as possible, close to 1, but we also we have generally 4 items across the horizontal view of the page. We want that first click rank to be at least a 4. So you want people to take an action to click. You want them to click towards the top of the result. You want them to add that item to cart and then get conversion. It's just kind of basically your online funnel, but you need to break it down into segments to tackle those each individually. So in all of our dashboards, those are all the critical metrics that we consider.
That's really good concrete info there. Thank you for that. Someone's worried about ethics. Someone's always worried about ethics with AI, right? There's been lots of articles about this. They say, how can I be sure that the AI part of this is ethical? Are there any challenges there, and how can I prepare for them? Fraser, got an answer for them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd say to ensure ethical AI, maintain control over your data, over your models. Avoid lock-in with restrictive tools that don't allow, that kind of modulate or orchestration of different components. It's critical that you have an open framework that allows for testing, monitoring, and possibly most importantly, quick intervention, right? So ensuring data transparency by knowing how the data is sourced and processed that is being used to serve your customers. And definitely build explainability into your tooling as well, so that decisions are clear and not black box. I'd say, challenges in this realm often stem from lack of control and opaque decisions. So it's really about the openness of the framework to allow for that full oversight and to make explainability a priority.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Fraser. Well, that was great. Good questions from the audience there. You guys were all clearly listening. Thank you for that. And I think with that, we've reached the end of our time. So we're going to wrap it up there, even though I'm sure we could probably talk for a lot longer about this. There's a lot to unpack. So all that remains is to thank our wonderful subject matter experts today, Fraser and Tom. It's been a real pleasure talking today. I learned a lot. I don't always on these things, but you gave me a lot to think about. So thanks so much. And thanks for watching, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Take care.